Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. It is simply not true that the Chinese and Russians are there. I've seen the intelligence. There are no ships and no submarines. Senior Nordic diplomats told the Financial Times that, dismissing U.S. claims of Chinese and Russian naval activity around Greenland. As Arctic security debates unfold at Sweden's major defense forum, and EU leaders call for a European Security Council to strengthen collective decision-making, there's much to discuss. And joining us now to talk about it is Professor Rasmus Gjedssø Bertelsen, Professor of Northern Studies at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Good to have you back on the program, Professor.
Good morning.
Now, I know we've discussed Greenland a few times. We've put it in also the framing that the tensions keep rising. Now, what do you think of this latest statement by Nordic intelligence, which is basically fed also through NATO? And then how do we reconcile that with what Donald Trump is saying, that there are all these Chinese ships everywhere around Greenland and also Russians? How do we reconcile those 2 points?
Well, I think I worded it on the 23rd of December in your program. I think I worded it that the U.S. president is a very creative person. A U.S. colleague of mine was so kind to comment back to me saying that was a very creative way of putting it. I mean, President Trump, he makes claims that, at least in this case, have no basis in reality.
Well, I want to jump in on that word. You said it's creative, and I think there's also more behind the meaning of that, Professor. Also, let's go to that conference in Sweden. This also saw the Defense Commissioner and Space Commissioner, Mr. Kubilius, attend, and also the NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Now, his quote is also that apparently talks on Greenland are constructive. How do we read that? Can you tell us a bit more what that means from your experience?
I assume that, as we have talked about before, of course, the Kingdom of Denmark, Greenland, they have to, I mean, they cannot engage in any discussion giving in to American demands of making Greenland a part of America, of the United States. That's absolutely intolerable. The Kingdom of Denmark cannot give any opening for that, and there, of course, the both the Danish and the Greenlandic side have been very clear that Greenland has self-determination, and this is purely up to the Greenlanders how they see their future. And then, of course, parallel to that, well, then Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, of course, has invested a lot more money in Arctic defense in recent years. And I also see Europe, I see the Nordic countries moving much more into Arctic defense. And of course, what is interesting, looking at the Sälen conference, this Swedish National Defense Conference, and this year is actually the 80th year of this National Swedish Defense Conference. The association behind it, People and Defense, I think was founded in 1940. And it is, of course, very interesting to see the development of Sweden from the alliance, the non-aligned Cold War country, to the very staunch NATO partner today. And it's of course also very interesting to see the integration, the geostrategic integration of the Nordic and North Atlantic space from the Baltic Sea area to the Barents Sea area to the North Atlantic area, and to see yes, the Nordic political and defense integration spanning all the way from the Baltic Sea to the North Atlantic.
Mm-hmm. This is one thing that President Trump brings up a lot is many of his quotes in the last weeks. It's about security. It's about something that he needs, that the United States sees. Our allies need us to understand this. It always seems to be about the same sort of quote here. But then I'm wondering, how much is this really a security concern by the United States, or is this more of a symbolic battle? Do you see this as more the United States and Donald Trump wanting more influence in the Arctic? Which one is it? Is it both?
Well, I mean, we talked about before that I have said that, in my view, this didn't make much either political science or economics sense, because the Kingdom of Denmark would grant the United States practically unlimited military access to Greenland, and U.S. investment in Greenland is very welcome. So I made the argument that I think this is about President Trump's personality, and I think it's about his desire to be for a legacy as a president who expanded the U.S. territory by 20%. The United States gaining Greenland would expand U.S. territory by 20%. Professor Helen Thompson, Cambridge, has recently made the argument that from a U.S. point of view, well, you cannot, I mean, sovereignty and military control is indistinguishable. So Professor Thompson, she also makes a very interesting argument that from a U.S. Point of view, it doesn't make sense that the Kingdom of Denmark has sovereignty, but they have no military control. And in fact, it's the United States that has military control, defends the territory of another sovereign state. Mm-hmm. So I think we are somewhere between the personality argument and that sovereignty military control argument. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's going to be, as you said, if it is only about the president's personality argument, that's going to be even more volatile than other policies that we'll have to see in terms of how he decides to go next and what the Europeans can do as a counter. And with that, I want to also go into the conference that you mentioned that was in Sweden, the 80th year, actually, in fact. So that's also significant. As I mentioned in the beginning, Andris Kubilius was there, the Defense Commissioner for the European Union, and he said some interesting statements about needing an intellectual big bang, a European Security Council, also hinting that there needs to be a European army. Now, how realistic is this? How do you read this? I mean, this is also that has received a lot of criticism from member states that you cannot go into that direction. Have times changed? How do you interpret his new wish list?
Well, I mean, that is basically the big challenge for Europe. I mean, in my view, Europe doesn't spend too little on defense, and I don't think Europe spent too little on defense before. The problem is that Europe gets so little out of its defense spending because Europe doesn't enjoy the enormous returns to scale that the United States enjoys, that China enjoys, that Russia enjoys. I mean, there's simply too many tank models, there are too many frigate classes, etc. in Europe. Overcoming that is, of course, addressing questions of, for example, national defense industries, and overcoming questions of sovereignty, military traditions, etc. But if Europe is to get value for its defense spending, it will need, in my view, much deeper integration. But that also requires, for example, creating a common strategic culture. And that is, of course, also something where the United States or China or Russia benefits from a unified political strategic system, which we do not have in Europe. Mm-hmm. And if I can add a personal note, almost 20 years ago, I was a young Danish postdoc at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And as a Nordic, as a European at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, it was remarkable to see how, for example, key American institutions as Harvard play a role in cultivating a common American strategic culture, which doesn't exist in a much, much more intellectually fractured Europe.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's one of those key points. So you mentioned deeper integration. I mean, this is something, and we talk about Europe. I mean, this is a term as well for our audience. I mean, there will be different ideas what that means. Is that the European Union? Are those European key allies? What is Europe in that sense? So I want to point specifically to the European Union, and deeper integration is already proving a challenge on other areas. But I'm just wondering if that's feasible in your mind. Can Europe integrate on such a deep level, the European Union, on a defense level, as the Commissioner here has suggested?
Well, I mean, I also think a positive dimension is that if we look at what are Europe's challenges. So Europe doesn't need 11 nuclear carriers like the United States to go around the world. I mean, Europe has a security challenge on the on its east side from Russia, a conventional military challenge there. And if you look at the Mediterranean area, then of course it's not a conventional military threat. It's a much more societal development, etc. question. So the challenges are big for Europe, but also I actually think that Europe's, the integration challenges are big, but I also think that the threats are not unmanageable.
Mm-hmm. And just briefly before we close, this week may see Marco Rubio, Secretary of State of the United States, meeting Danish authorities. What do you think will happen at the end of this week with that?
Well, that is, of course, a very, very big question. But in a way, you can also imagine that Secretary Rubio, he's also in a challenging position. I mean, because in so many ways, President Trump, I think, has created a completely unnecessary crisis in NATO. We talked about that the United States could, without problems, having any military or investment needs in Greenland satisfied. And the Secretary, of course, has to answer to a president who has made this very big personal question and personal ambition.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the latest analysis there of the situation. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure speaking to you, getting the latest from that Arctic expert. Professor Rasmus Gjedssø Bertelsen, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.